This video will demonstrate how to configure an IP-originated call with CVP with a Type 10 VRU. Basically, we'll see a small demonstration of an IP caller dialing this specific dial number and to reach CVP, get a prompt, and then reach an agent. It's a very basic call, but it will demonstrate the configuration points required on both the CUCM or the Cisco Unified Communications Manager and CUPS, in this case where we'll use a proxy to configure the dial plan, as well as the configuration required on the ICM side. The assumption here is that you have already installed your CVP and configured your CVP, again using either just the proxy to route your outbound calls or using static routes. But for the most part, the configuration will focus on the call manager, CUPS, and ICM, as those are the typical confusion points for configuration. The versions used in this demonstration are CVP 702, ICM and CTI OS version 721, Call Manager 700, and CUPS 103. So let's get started with the demonstration of the IP-originated caller with the CVP Type 10 VRU. We use two desktops, in this case two CTI OS desktops, where one agent desktop will act as a caller, as the IP-originated caller, and the other desktop will be the agent that receives the call. There's a simple ICM script set up in which basically the call comes in, receives a 20-second prompt treatment, and then queues to an agent. And since the agent is ready and available, the call will directly reach the agent without being queued. So I'll go ahead and place the call with the dial number we showed on the slide earlier, which is our dial plan. So 700, 100, 8400 is the number I will dial from the IP phone to reach CVP, to receive a prompt, and then reach an agent. So the call has been placed, and though you will not be able to hear it, what I'm currently hearing is a prompt, a 20-second prompt, and this call is receiving this treatment through CVP, and as soon as that prompt ends, it will reach the agent. So the point here is to show that the call, and then we will go through the actual configuration required. Now the call is ringing the agent's phone, and here I will go ahead and answer. And now we have established the IP-originated call with an agent. Now we'll go ahead and hang up and then go through the configuration points, starting with the configuration required on the call manager. So basically, the first thing we need to set up on the call manager is our CUCM, Communications Manager, is two things: a route point and a route pattern and a SIP trunk to reach CVP. So if we start with the SIP trunk, in this case the configuration is pre-existing, as I've already been able to place the call. So I'll just go ahead and review the configuration. So there's a SIP trunk created to one of the proxies in our lab, and in this case this is the name given to this trunk that's created, and it's basically a SIP trunk to a proxy. And for that, what you need, the two main things you need are the actual IP address of the destination proxy. In this case, you also need to make sure you specify a security profile, which is just the default one in this case, and the SIP profile, which is also the standard SIP profile. And the other key thing is to make sure you pick RFC 2833 as your DTMF signaling method for when doing SIP calls with CVP. This has nothing to do with Type 10, etc., but this is just to for review purposes. So once that's done, you go ahead and save that. We'll ask you to reset the trunk as well, and you should reset the trunk. Once that's done, the next thing we need to configure is a route pattern for that dial number we used. So the dial number we used is 700, 100, 8400. And a route pattern is already existing for that. If you were to go ahead to add a new one, which would bring you to a page like this, You can go ahead and explicitly specify 700, 100, 8400, or in this case I've used a wildcard for any other numbers I may use for other calls. And associated that dial number to the trunk, the SIP trunk that was created to the proxy. So that is the only two things you really need to do on this page. Once you do that, again, go ahead and save that. Now the next thing is to move on. So this will basically say this will originate the call from call manager to the SIP proxy, and then the next thing we need to move on to is the actual CUPS configuration. Here we will demonstrate what is the static routes we set up on CUPS to send the call to CVP. You could also do it where you don't use a proxy at all for a test environment. You could just send the call directly from Communications Manager to CVP, in which case the SIP trunk that was configured, instead of using the IP address of the proxy, you would just specify the IP address of CVP directly. So in this case, since we're using a proxy, we will go ahead under the static routes selection and look for the static route that I added for this test. So again, if you do an add new, you'd get this screen where you'd go ahead and fill in the dial number as well as the IP address of CVP in this case that the proxy will route the call to. Again, you'd go ahead and save that, and that is the configuration, the only configuration you need for the originating call for the call to reach CVP. Once the call reaches CVP, and then assuming CVP is configured and is in the in-service state where it's ready to send calls to ICM, the next configuration point is on ICM. So for those, we basically need a few things there. The first one you need is a Type 10 Network VRU, and the way you would do that is by launching the Network VRU Explorer under Explorer Tools, under Configuration Manager. And that would bring you to this screen. Here you would go ahead and do an add new for a new network VRU. In this case, I've added a Type 10 Network VRU. I gave it a name, and I specified its type as Type 10. And the other two key things you need underneath that are the labels that are required in order for CVP to establish the VRU legs of the call. So the first leg, in order to set up the VRU leg, you need to set up a label on the CVP routing client, or the PIM via which ICM receives the call from CVP. This is a 10-digit label, and you can use any format you want, any numerical format you want, but this is a key thing you need to remember when you configure when you set up your configuration on CVP to establish your VRU leg. So again, you need to specify a label on your CVP routing client, and then you see another label here which is set up on the call manager routing client, but this is for when you do warm transfers. This has been captured in another video in the detail of why this label is required and under what circumstances you will use it. So please reference the warm transfer video for discussion related to this label. But in this case, for the call flow that we're doing, where we are simply getting a prompt and getting to an agent, you basically need at least a label on the CVP routing client. And that is associated with the same customer instance that we are going to talk about in a second. So the customer instance is another key configuration point to remember. Make sure you create a customer instance and then associate that customer instance to the same Type 10 VRU as well that we created earlier. So you can name it anything you want, and then make sure you go ahead and associate it to the Type 10 network VRU. And this customer instance will also be used in all other configuration points when you, for example, when you do dial numbers, call types, you want to associate all of those to this customer instance. So we have done the VRU type, we have done the customer instance. The next thing you want to do is the dial number. So let's go to the dial number screen. We create the dial number on the PIM on which CVP we'll send the call, and again we look for the customer instance that we want to associate the dial number to. So 700, 100, 8400 has been configured here on the CVP PIM with the customer instance that's associated to the type 10 network VRU. It is also mapped to a call type. Again, you can just create any call type and associate it to that same customer instance. So let's take a quick look at that. So when you go to call type and pick that same customer instance, in this case I have the call type that I'm using for this call, and it is tied to that customer instance. So once that's done and you schedule that script, notice this is the script where we had initially placed that first call, and one call did come in and reach an agent. So we'll go ahead and also look at the call type manager on how we schedule the script. Under schedules, you can pick the call type that was created for this test, and in this case it's associated to this script that I'm currently running with. I'm going to go ahead and reset the script to once again just try the same call to show that basically it is coming into this script, but it's from a configuration point of view. What we have reviewed, what we have looked at, is all that is required on the call manager side and the ICM side, as well as CUPS or the proxy, in order for you to route an IP originated call with a type 10 VRU. Actually, one more configuration point that is required on the ICM side that I should mention is, which is the key configuration point, is under your PG. So you launch your PG Explorer, and on your CVP PIM or the routing client, you want to make sure that on the Advanced tab, your network VRU is also associated to the type 10 VRU. This is a key point, actually. You definitely do not want to forget this. So to review again, your routing client tied to the type 10 VRU, the customer instance, the dial number, and of course finally all your routing scripts or your network VRU scripts will also be created on this routing client, on that type 10 VRU. So if we look at the network VRU script list and we pick the type 10 network VRU and that same customer instance, then in this case the WAV file that's being played, or the script that's being played to the caller before he reaches the agent, is this one here, and again that's tied to that network VRU. It specifies the WAV file name, it's going to use the Play Media Micro app, and it's tied to that customer instance. Once you have those things in place, again, if you go ahead, make your call, we should see that in this case the caller is hearing that 20-second WAV file, and as soon as that caller is done with that part of the script, it will go ahead and reach an agent. The agent is reserved. We answer the call, and that is the end of this demonstration.